Today we're going to talk about ordering rational numbers. So we already talked about comparing them using less than, greater than, or equal to. Now we're going to be given a set that we're going to put in order from least to greatest. So our recommendation is going to be to turn every number into a decimal. There's lots of different routes that you can go to ordering rational numbers. And if you figured out a way that you think is a little bit quicker, that's fine, as long as you are showing the work to prove your answers. But for the sake of this notes, we want you doing it this way so that you can get in the habit of doing it correctly. So step 2 then would be to add zeros if necessary to the right of the last digit, so there are the same number of decimal places in each number. Then look at the numbers and ask yourself, are the signs different or are the whole numbers different? And then after you've done that, compare the numbers. So let's look at this first set. Order each set of rational numbers from least to greatest. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite each of these as a decimal. So my whole numbers stay the same, but I'm going to convert any fractional part. So 1/3, maybe you know it by heart. If not, use your cheat sheet. 1/3 is 0.3 repeating, so 4.3 repeating. 7 1/4, maybe you know it. If not, use your cheat sheet. 1/4 is 0.25, so it's 7.25. Then we already have a decimal here, -4 42/100ths. We already have a decimal here, 7 500ths, and then 0 is just 0. So once I've done that, I'm going to make sure that they're the same number of digits after the decimal point. So we've got 1 here, we've got 2, 2, 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure all of these have 2. So since this one only has 1, I'm going to add another decimal value here. Normally we would add zeros, but since this is a repeating number, it's going to be followed by a 3. So now I've converted everything to a decimal. Now I'm going to look at my negatives versus positives. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to highlight the negatives. So these two are negatives, and I'm going to highlight the positives. I didn't highlight 0 because 0 is kind of its own number. It's in the middle of negatives and positives. So at least we should be able to identify that my 2 negative numbers should be the first 2 numbers, okay, before I move into the positives. So I'm going to compare. Remember, a bigger negative is the smallest number. So I'm looking at 33 and 42. Which one is bigger? 42, so that's actually our smallest number. So after that, the next smallest number is this other negative. Now, before I move into the positives, 0 is in the middle of those, so that's going to be our third number. Now I'm comparing my positives. I have 25 and 5. Positives work normally, so our smaller number is 5, which makes this our last one. So now when I put them in order, I'm going to put them back in the original form. So -4 and 42/100ths was already that in original form. Then our second number was -4 and 1/3 originally. Our third number is just 0. Our fourth number is the same originally. And our fifth number was 7 1/4 originally. All right, let's try another example. So first thing we are going to do is we're going to rewrite them as decimals. So -2 1/2. Again, maybe you know the conversion by heart, but if not, use your cheat sheet. 1/2 is 0.5 or 5/10. The second number is already a decimal. Third number, -2, and then the fractional part, 3/4, maybe you know it. If not, use your conversion chart, is 75. Then we've got 2 3/8, maybe you know that one. If not, your conversion chart, you look at it, 3/8 is 0.375. And then our last one is already in a decimal form. Don't forget to show the bar over it because that's showing that it's a repeating number. Now I'm going to go through again, identify my negatives, identify my positives. So I got negative, 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 negative. And then I have 1 positive. So I should know right away this positive number should be my biggest number since there's only one of them. So now let's look at comparing the decimals. So there is one number after the decimal, 2, 2, we have 3 here, and 1. So I'm going to rewrite all of these so there are 3 numbers after the decimal point since that was the longest. So this is 5 followed by 2 zeros. I'm going to add a 1 0 here so we get 3 numbers. I'm going to add 1 0 here so we get 3 numbers. And then here I'm not adding zeros, I'm adding 4 since it's a repeating number. Now we can compare. So I'm just comparing the negatives. So if we look at the negatives, first off, I'm going to look at the whole number parts. We've got -2, 0, -2, -0. So I know that -2 is smaller, so I'm going to start with these two and compare. We've got 500 and 750. Remember, a bigger negative is the smallest number. So 750 is bigger than 500, so that is our smallest number, which means the next one here is going to be the 500. Now I'm comparing my two negative zeros. So we've got 550 and 444. The bigger negative is 550, which makes it our smaller number, which means the next one will be our other negative, and then our last number is our positive. So now we're going to go back and rewrite that in original form. So our first number was -2.75, which was -2 3/4. Our second number was -2.5, or -2.5 originally. Our third number was just -0 55/100 originally. Our fourth number was -0.4 repeating originally, and our last number was our +2 3/8 originally. Alright, one more and then we're going to have you try one on your own. So again, first thing, I'm rewriting them as decimals. So -6 4/10 is already a decimal, so I will leave it like that. -6 5/8, if you don't know it, use your conversion chart. 5/8 is 0.625. So it's going to be -6.625. This one's already a decimal, so -6.04. This is already a decimal, -6.38, and 0, I'm just leaving 0. So again, just like I did before, I'm going to go through and I'm going to highlight my negatives. Okay? And I'm not highlighting 0 as a positive, it's kind of, again, that middle ground in between the negatives and the positives. So, I'm going to look at the decimal values to make sure they have the same number of decimal values. There's 1 here, 3 here, there's 2 here, there's 2 here, so what I'm going to do is I am going to add 0, so they have the same number of decimals. So the biggest number of decimals that we have is 3. So I'm going to add 2 zeros here so that there's 3 numbers. I'm going to add 1 0 here and 1 0 here. Now I'm going to compare. So I'm looking for our smallest number is going to be our biggest negative. So we've got, they all have the same whole number part. So all I need to look at is the decimals part. We've got 400, 625, 40, and 380. So the biggest decimal, our smallest number, is the 625. Now, the next biggest number, we've got 400, 40, 380. The next biggest is 400, so that's going to be our next smallest number. Then we've got 40 and 380. 380 is bigger, so that's a smaller number. And then 40 will be our last one with the negative, and 0, since it's not a negative, will be our final number. So going back and writing it in order. -6.625 originally was -6 5/8. -6.4 was our next, 400 was our last one, which was -6.4 originally. The third number, -6.38, was -6.38 originally. And then fourth was -6.040, which was -6.04 originally. And then our last number is 0. So go ahead and try this one on your own. I want you rewriting as decimals, then putting them in order.